All right, so we have the CAAM meeting. So this is all about Canada and America and our relations. And if we're going to get any of that goodie bag reset, trillions of dollars that Biden's paying.
To net zero by 2050, signed on and making a commitment to achieve the Paris Agreement. And our commitment is a shared one with the United States on tackling and fighting climate change. The opportunities for Canada in building back better on this roadmap between Canada and the US are an abundant, particularly in the area of fighting climate change. You're absolutely right. We have the cleanest energy and electric systems, and much of which in Quebec. Canadian manufacturers are highly efficient, and if I just sort of just point out a few examples that we already are doing in in clean tech. Maybe one that comes to mind. I mean, I keep using this company, and there are many, but it was just that I met her the other day. But Carbon Cure is a Canadian company that is that in the building, in the use of cement, decarbonizing, and it is a green input. It's a green input into construction projects in the U.S. But when you look at cars or buses or trains or trolleys or ferry boats, vehicles, I mean, that's Canada's rolling stock. We have expertise here around green transportation. We are an input into the American transit system. When I look at a company that is like New Flyer, I mean, electric buses, that is building buses and parts in Alabama, Minnesota, New York, and in Canada. Canada ranks number 4 around lithium battery supply chain, and we are one of the lowest carbon footprint for this battery production, which the U.S. Is making a commitment for an entire infrastructure around e-vehicles. So there are many inputs. I mean, from forestry to aluminum to steel to construction to wood. These are the integration between Canada. We're already building together. We're innovating together. The Canadian Technology Accelerator, to which we have presence in Boston, in San Francisco, in New York. Like, these are opportunities where we are going to work together. We're going to keep working together because it's going to benefit Canadian workers, Canadian businesses. It's going to benefit American workers, American businesses, and guess what? We're going to fight climate change together.
Ms. Raminato, you have 20 seconds.
It's fine. Thank you very much, Minister.
So that brings a close to the first hour. Thank you so much, Minister Ng, for taking the time. I know you're very busy, like we all are, but thank you very much for taking the time and giving us your perspective on this very important issue that's coming forward. So thank you very much again. And I understand that the officials will be here for the next hour, so we can go right into questions, as I realize they don't have any opening statements. So we can go to Mr. Holback for 6 minutes, please.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. It's great to see you this morning, this afternoon.
Bye, Randy.
I'll start off with Mr. Verheul. I think we're following each other around. We've been meeting so much over the last 2 months, whether it's Trade Committee or now this committee. We should just maybe rent an apartment together or something, I would say. But I appreciate you being here again today and your colleagues. Mr. Verheul, the situation I'm really concerned about with Buy America is the unintended consequences of it, plus the other things we're hearing. And what I mean by that is we see a scenario where a U.S. company makes the exact same widget as a Canadian company, but because it's American-based, it gets to take advantage of Buy America and create a very, very healthy balance sheet. And then that same U.S. company goes in and competes with that Canadian company in Canada and around the world. So is there anything in our trade agreements that allows us to say to that company in the U.S. that, no, you've got subsidized unfairly through Buy America, you can't now dump products into Canada? Did I lose Mr. Verheul?
Mr. Verheul, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I was offline for a second there. If you could repeat the question, that would be great.
Sure. What I was basically saying, Mr. Verheul, is when you see companies in the U.S. who take advantage of Buy America, and that props up their balance sheets to such a situation that they're just so much stronger than a Canadian who makes the exact same widget. Is there anything in our trade agreements that says, wait a minute, you took advantage of Buy America, you're unfairly subsidized, you can't just dump the product now into Canada or anywhere else around the world? Is there anything in our trade agreements or WTO that would prevent that?
Well, certainly if the U.S. is using Buy America programs to produce products at non-competitive prices and try to provide those products into the Canadian market, we do have recourse for that. But under the government procurement agreement we have at the WTO, the U.S., while we are exempted under Buy American, as I think you have heard, the U.S. has carved out protection for Buy America, and so there's no direct way that we.
Okay, is that me freezing or you freezing?
I think that's Mr. Verheul.
Okay. Would one of the other officials be able to answer it, Chair?
Sure, absolutely. Whoever wants to answer is fine.
Mr. Verheul is obviously having some computer problems.
Yeah, we'll try to get him realigned.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Forsyth, would you want to take a crack at that?
Sure, I could. I think where he was going was that. Oh, he's back again.
You're muted, Mr. Verheul.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm not sure how long I was out there.
You just started to explain the difference between Buy American and Buy America, and where the exemptions are carve-outs for the U.S. And I think you froze again. Did you hear me?
Yes, I did hear you. Okay, yes, no, with respect to Buy American, we do have an exemption under the government procurement agreement at the WTO. With Buy America, the U.S. has never made any commitments at the government procurement agreement to capture those kinds of programs, so they are within their rights to use those programs. But just to finish off the response to your question, Randy, I think that if the U.S. is using those projects to then produce products that would be exported to Canada, we do have recourse if those products are being unfairly subsidized or dumped in our market.
So it'd be similar to a scenario where the U.S. would be subsidizing not only maybe the company, but the R&D of that company and giving it an unfair advantage versus competitors in Canada that wouldn't have that wallet in their back pocket. Lost you again.
You're muted, Mr. Verheul.
Oh, yes, when it comes to research and development, that's a little bit more open. You can certainly spend on research and development if it's not tied directly to a specific product. If it's more general research and development, then there's no real restriction on that. So it would depend on the extent to which the U.S. is applying this directly to products that would be potentially exported to Canada.
Okay. In regards to the last time we faced this type of scenario, we actually had a exemption with the federal part of it, but we lost out on the state and municipal side. Are we able to carve out anything there now? And has anything changed since the last time we faced Buy America with Obama that we have today? I think he's muted again.
Sorry, I'm not sure why that happened, but yes, I think the difference this time around is that we've had a number of conversations with the Biden administration since they came into office, and there's an openness and a willingness to discuss what kind of potential impact some of these policies could have on Canada, and a willingness to try to ensure that there's not the kind of negative implications we might have seen in the past. So I think that's an important consideration. We have an open door for that kind of dialogue, and that gives us the window to make the arguments we need to make about how we're both far better off if we maintain our integrated economy.
Yeah, so then
Mr. Holbach, I will add 1 more minute to your time because of the technical difficulties.
I appreciate that, Chair. I guess it's fair to say then in the contracts that the U.S. government, federal government would give out into the state level or municipal level, that would be stipulated in those contracts then is something we would say that, wait a minute, Canada has to be exempted because it's federal dollars being utilized for that infrastructure project, even though it's maybe being administered at the municipal level or the state level. Is that fair to say?
Well, that will be our argument that if the U.S. is going to provide those funds to state level governments and lower, that in order to have the best kind of outcome, we should not have a result where there are restrictions on Canadian input into those projects. And that's what we'd be looking at. But strictly speaking, at least from a government procurement obligation point of view, there are no restrictions on those federal funds that are.
Small Canadian wineries by 2022. And this is going to have a huge impact on many small Canadian wineries, most of the wineries in my riding, for instance. And the Canadian wine growers have asked that a trade legal replacement for this exemption be introduced to support the industry, much like other countries around the world, including Australia and the United States, support their industries. And I'm just wondering if you can let us know if such a program will be included in the upcoming budget.
Well, thank you, Mr. Cannings. It's lovely to see you. You're right. It feels like I've seen many colleagues in the different committees that I've been of late, but it's wonderful. And it is. I've been to your riding, and it's wonderful out there. I think what I will do is leave the finance minister to share the budget with all of you when she tables the budget. So why don't I leave it there? But here's what I can assure you, that we absolutely recognize the tremendous value of the wine industry and the contribution of the sector to its world renowned. I mean, our reputation as world-class agricultural producers, particularly in wine. And on this issue, I continue to work very closely with the industry, but also with province. That we have the right sort of, the right mechanisms that are in place so that we continue to support the viability, not only the viability, but the opportunities that continue and for the Canadian wine industry, both domestically and in exportation abroad.
Well, you mentioned the domestic part, and you're also the Minister for Small Business, as I understand. And I'm just wondering if you could expand on any efforts that your government has been making to, eliminate the interprovincial trade barriers for wine and beer makers. This is perhaps an even bigger problem. And on that, I just wondered, my neighboring MP, Dan Elvis, has a private member's bill that would allow Canada Post to ship beer and wine between provinces. And I'm just wondering what your government's thought on that bill is.
Well, thank you very much for that. Around interprovincial trade, I know that my colleagues in both Minister LeBlanc as well as Minister Champagne are working very actively at that. We understand that the value of removing those barriers in the interest of our Canadian businesses, and you're absolutely right, the small businesses. So we're as we do with virtually all of our work, we are working whole of government so that we can, so that we are pointing our capabilities to the Canadian and to the business who are the recipients of this. So we are working very hard on interprovincial on the interprovincial movement of goods, and I, in the meantime, continue to help our Canadian companies find those markets and to pursue greater export into the many markets that are afforded by so many of the trade agreements that we have today. It's nice to be in a position, especially as I meet with my G7 colleagues, to be the only one around the table that has an agreement with all of them. But all of this is to say is that we need to keep doing the work to help them export and to create opportunities for them to also take advantage of the domestic market.
Thank you. How much time do I? Just one quick question, Minister, and that's I can't resist getting back into forestry, and that is, I won't mention softwood lumber, but as you know from your previous life on the, I'm a big proponent of mass timber, engineered wood, and these products that can be shipped to the United States without the problematic tariffs of softwood lumber. I'm just wondering if you can comment on whether those products will be affected by any of the 2 or 3 Buy America programs that we've heard about.
Well, of course, we continue to work with the United States on any provisions that might increase, American content. And in that, as I said earlier, we will ensure that that Canada, we will work to make sure that Canada isn't affected or our supply chains. But I do think that around softwood lumber, lumber prices are high, and that is causing harm to both workers and to the sector. So I think we need to keep pushing hard and to work on a negotiated settlement here. I think both of us, both countries, are also committed to affordable housing, and I think it's in everyone's interest to ensure that affordable housing is also increasingly more affordable to build as well. So I think that we will need to keep working together with our American partners on this front.
Thank you, Mr. Gennings.
Thank you.
We will now start our second round, and for 5 minutes, we have Ms. Alisela, please.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. Canadians are coming to me saying that they're quite concerned that perhaps we're not taking this shift in American position seriously enough. It looks like the Americans have been very clear on the direction they're taking. President Biden signed the executive order right when he came in around Buy America. The roadmap that was just outlined focused on modernizing trade rules, including those related to procurement, to ensure that countries could use their own taxpayer dollars to spur domestic investment. All the signaling is around domestic manufacturing capability in the U.S., self-sufficiency, starting with these large infrastructure projects. And now we hear $2.3 trillion additional will be spent on infrastructure, going way beyond roads and bridges to investment in manufacturing and expansion of broadband. Can you give us a comprehensive list of all of the infrastructure elements that Canada cannot bid on as a result of this executive Buy America order?
Well, I want to thank the honorable member for that question. And let me begin by saying that I take this with absolute seriousness and priority, and ensuring that my officials and I are working at this with absolute diligence. As I said, our government is...
Minister, do you have a list?
I think I get a chance to respond in the same equitable time, Mr. Chair. Is that right?
Not a committee, Minister. So do you have a comprehensive list of the things that Canada can't bid on?
We're going to keep working with the Americans. The American administration have also said that they are that they fully intend to respect trade agreements and trade rules. We will, as I said, if there's an effort to expand or introduce new domestic content requirements, we will absolutely work to ensure that it does not apply to Canada or affect Canadian supply chains. And we're going to do this in the strong Team Canada approach that we have been doing. And I would encourage all of us here to work together. I think all of us are here to work for our Canadian companies and workers.
We haven't been successful in the past in KXL, preventing KXL from being canceled, in preventing this Buy America from going into effect. Other witnesses, including the ambassador, has said that we're probably not going to be able to change this legislation to make us exempt. Could you give us some idea of why you think we will be able to prevent further measures taken by the U.S. from not affecting Canada?
Well, let me start with your original premise about the executive order on Buy American. That does not apply to Canada. So
Buy America.
Buy America, as I said, we're going to, if there are efforts to expand or introduce new domestic content requirements, we will absolutely work to make sure that that does not apply to Canada or to affect the Canadian supply chains. And when,
but Minister, what will you do differently? We haven't been successful in preventing them in the past. So what can we do differently that will protect us in the future?
I think I'm not going to take lessons from the Conservatives who asked us to capitulate on the negotiation of NAFTA. I think what I'm going to do is work in a Team Canada approach, as we have done and we have demonstrated over the last 5 years, to stand up for Canadian interests. We successfully had steel and aluminum tariffs removed. We are working with the American administration. I and all my colleagues at all levels are working, including the ambassador, and we are going to work very hard to stand up to Canadian interest, just as we have done the last 5 years, and I will be doing that today and every day going forward.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Ms. Alislav. We will now move to Mr. McKay for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Minister. You'll be pleased to know I have no core questions for you today. I don't know whether to direct this question to you or to Mr. Verheul, who is, is deeply involved in the negotiations of the NAFTA 2.0. And what puzzles me in all of these Buy America or Buy American or executive orders and et cetera, is that by and large, the law provides that a treaty prevails over everything. So NAFTA 2.0 is it prevails in all matters pertaining to trade. So I don't quite get what is the president's authority, or Congress authority for that matter, to override a trade treaty. And I guess the second part of the question is, and it's really the flip side of the question, and again, I don't know whether it should be directed to you or to Mr. Verheul, is that if the Prime Minister did exactly the same thing that the President's done, which is issued an executive order, or if Parliament passed a Buy Canada or Buy Canadian legislation, would that stand up in any kind of trade dispute? So I'll leave it there and ask either one of you to respond. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Pleased to get questions from you. So so here we go.
Sometimes more than others.
No, always. And as colleagues, of course, it's always about working towards solutions. So I'm totally okay with all of that. With respect to the question, I mean, I guess the way I would respond is this. I had an opportunity to, of course, raise this issue with the new U.S. Trade Representative and Ambassador Tai. The administration is one that will be respectful of trade agreements, whether it is the new CUSMA between U.S., Mexico, and the U.S., but also a proponent for multilateral rules-based trade. So I think I share that. I share that because it would be our expectation that the U.S. Continues to continues and will and follow through with that. But I think the work that we are doing here using a Team Canada approach really is about with at many levels and through many interlocutors, including businesses and workers, to demonstrate and to make the case about how integrated our supply chain is, and relying on the Canada-U.S. supply chain, particularly whether it's infrastructure or energy or rolling stock sectors. We really are able to make the case on that roadmap to Canada in the U.S. because whether it's construction materials that are sourced from Canada that are typically lower carbon, or our energy, our electrical systems, which are among the cleanest in the world, or Canadian manufacturers who manufacture highly efficient and generally emit less carbon, and these Canada-U.S. supply chains are so integrated.
Well, I'm not disputing that the Canada-U.S. supply chains are integrated and that we have terrific companies, et cetera. What I would like to know is what is our legal position when, on the face of it, the government of the United States of America breaches a recently negotiated treaty that Mr. Verheul and many of his colleagues were intimately involved in. I just don't understand how, whether it's President Biden, who I like a great deal, as do many of us, as opposed to the predecessor, how he gets to say what he gets to say, and that ends up being where we're at. So I'll be curious as to what is our legal position?
Well, our position is that we are working with the U.S. administration to ensure that as they are implementing any provision that that there is no unintended consequence that will occur that will affect the Canada-U.S. supply chain. And I know you're going to have Steve here in the next session. I think he's there for an hour, and the officials are there for the next hour. So I guess he could take the legal question now, or he could take the legal question in the next session. But it's up to you.
Unfortunately, he'll have to take the next session. We're out of time.
Oh, all right. There you go.
Monsieur Salvo, vous avez 2,5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you. So I was wondering if you know if with the infrastructure plan, because again, yesterday President Biden promoted the first stage, which is of $2,000 billion for a plan of $4,000 billion on 10 years. So it was mentioning that all the contracts would go to American companies and that it would benefit American workers. So according to that infrastructure plan, will there be new requirements in terms of American content? And if so, on which products?
Thank you for that. The announcement was an announcement. So I'm saying to my colleagues here, as well as to Canadians, that if there is an effort to expand or introduce new domestic content requirements, we will absolutely work to ensure that they do not apply to Canada or they don't affect Canadian supply chains. And when we're talking about American infrastructure, I mean, in many of the meetings that we're having with American stakeholders and Canadian businesses and American businesses, we make the point that whether it's a wastewater project, for example, and this is what happened the last time. I mean, a wastewater project that gets initiated in the U.S., there are filters that are made, water filters that are made here in Canada. It is made by General Electric in Canada, and there were delays that were caused as a result of some of those content requirements, or their transit. They're going to be spending a lot of money on transit, and there are many manufacturers that are American manufacturers that actually are part of this supply chain in Canada. So we're going to continue to share these many examples, because it's American companies that are also talking to me and American workers who are talking to us. So I think the effectiveness of a Team Canada approach, and a strong one, will hold us well, because we want to be sure that it isn't affecting Canadian supply chains, because it also can affect American workers and businesses as well. So this is why I think it's really important to make sure that we are sharing what that integration is, and to remind our American friends and colleagues, Canada is also the top customer for 32 states, and we want to make sure that we are building back better in this relationship so that it really benefits Canadian workers, Canadian businesses that also make sure that we are truly doing that balance. And what is that balance? That balance is keeping Canadians healthy and safe. And
thank you, Minister. I'm sorry, but thank you. I don't have very much time. So I guess what we don't have, so we have groceries on shelves, thank goodness. What we don't have is new contracts coming to Canada. We are losing these new contracts because we can't get the customers over here for 2 hours. Minister, e-petition 3927 was tabled with the clerk. It is now up at the House of Commons website for signatures as of last Monday. Are you aware of this e-petition? Basically, simplicity, it calls on this to deem business owners, their employees, and their customers essential service, just as the province of Ontario has.
I'm looking forward to taking a look at that petition now that you have raised it with me. And I would say that our top priority is to fight this pandemic, is to keep Canadians safe. Essential services and goods are moving between the borders. We are absolutely balancing that and the commerce between the two countries and keeping Canadians safe. There's a light at the end of the tunnel with vaccines for sure. But as I said earlier, our trade numbers have resumed to pre-pandemic levels between Canada and the United States. We are going to keep doing this, but we must keep Canadians safe from COVID-19. We have introduced a lot of...
Thank you, Minister. I appreciate that. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left, please?
About a minute.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry to cut you off, Minister. I truly apologize, but it's not often I get an opportunity to speak to a minister. So, Minister, I guess my ask is this. Will you commit to bringing this issue forward to Minister Blair, as well as to your U.S. colleagues? And all they're asking for, and what I know is absolutely vital to our economic recovery, is to give clear and concise direction to the CBSA and to PHAC to deem these workers essential, just like our professional drivers, our truck drivers, if you will. It's the exact same thing. But literally, there's great food on the grocery shelves, Minister, but it's not hitting the tables of Canadians because people are losing their jobs. Would you commit to this, please?
What I do commit to is working as hard as I can to make sure that we fight COVID-19 and that we continue to do what we need to do to keep Canadians safe. And we are going to do that. We are going to, and we to help small businesses get through this, to bridge them to the other side of COVID-19. I think that the health of Canadians and the economy and the economic recovery is absolutely connected. That is our commitment as a government, keeping Canadians safe, supporting businesses, all businesses, small businesses, helping our businesses continue to export and continue to find opportunities and customers in the international marketplace like the U.S. All of that work continues, and the efforts of all of this is all in an effort to get us on that road to recovery, and one that is stronger because Canadians are healthy and safe.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. We will now go to Mr. Housefather for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Minister Ng. It's a pleasure to see you, and thank you for the extraordinary work that you and your parliamentary secretary have been doing in this file. I will share some time with Ms. Bendayan. But I wanted to give you the opportunity to clarify for Canadians exactly what we're talking about here. There's, as you said in your opening statement, there's the 1933 Buy American Act. There's the 1983 Buy America Act. And then there's President Biden's recent executive order. And then there's all of the different places where Canada is exempt from Buy American, whether through the GPA or the USMCA. Could you talk to the committee and to Canadians about exactly what the biggest concern is about the president's recent executive order that would change things under either Buy American or Buy America, and how you are working with your colleagues to handle that?
I want to thank the honourable member. It's very good to see you. It's too bad that I'm not able to see you and everyone in person, but I hope that will come soon enough. As I said in my opening remarks, Buy American refers to an act that the American administration enacted, and because Canada is a party to the WTO's GPA, government procurement provisions, we are exempt from Buy American. We are exempt from that. Buy America may may apply to to American content, greater American content. And it is here that I have for sure heard from Canadian and American businesses and workers on both sides of the borders, because they understand that the value of open procurement markets, in fact, any restrictions on that will actually have a negative impact. Our supply chains are so integrated. We work so closely together. In fact, we build together, we innovate together. And I just want to assure the committee that any expansion into greater content requirements, we are going to actively work on to defend, to ensure that there is no impact on our critical supply chains and on Canadian businesses and Canadian workers.
Thank you so much, Minister. And I just have one more question before I turn it over to Ms. Bendayan. I know you've been working closely both with employers groups and unions on both sides of the border in order to ensure that Canada's perspective is heard loudly and clearly in Washington and in the different states that are applying the executive order. Can you talk about the collegiality of that relationship and how that's working out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that everyone here will have experienced the Team Canada, the strong Team Canada approach that we have been taking for the last 5 years. Today is not different. I think that we need to continue this very strong approach around Team Canada, working with interlocutors, for me, with the USTR, but with other legislators in the US. Our ambassador is working hard at this, my cabinet colleagues, but indeed, I would invite that all of you can also work with us together so that we can advocate for this strong Team Canada approach, engaging U.S. stakeholders, decision makers at all levels of government, at the with workers and civil society. We will demonstrate our value, the integration of how close we are and how close our economies are. These are the stories that I am able to share. This is the case that I get to make and that we all get to make to our interlocutors in the U.S., but also to Canadian businesses and American businesses that operate in Canada. We want to be sure that we are keeping these integrated supply chains and these relationships open in such a way, because they are not only beneficial to Canada, of course it is, but it also serves as a benefit to American workers and American businesses as well. And we are both committed, both countries, on building back better on this roadmap between Canada and the U.S. And we have ambitions to also tackle climate change together. There's a lot of great Canadian input into the American infrastructure industry. So these are the opportunities, and I would encourage a strong, continued Team Canada approach in this advocacy.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Over to you.
Thank you. Just picking up, Minister, on that advocacy, I had the opportunity to speak to many members of the Canadian American Business Council as well as others, and there does seem to be real organization on the ground, just as there was when we were negotiating the new NAFTA, in order to ensure that our American friends and counterparts understand the importance of this for both our countries. And I guess in light of the fact that just yesterday President Biden did make an announcement regarding the $2 trillion infrastructure plan that he is looking to roll out, I wondered if you could perhaps speak to Canadians and to this committee about the importance of moving forward, but also that we do have some time in order to get this done. It is my understanding that there is no bill currently on the floor. And also, if we look back to recent history, in 2010, the last time we were able as a country to gain an exemption from Buy America, that was done actually after the bill was introduced in a separate agreement. So perhaps you can give us a little bit of context and regarding the strategy going forward.
Sorry, Minister, 1 minute. Sorry.
Thank you for that. Let me start by saying that our government will always stand up for Canadian workers and our businesses. And if there is an effort to expand or to introduce new domestic content requirements, of course, we will absolutely work to ensure that this does not apply to Canada or affect Canadian supply chain.
Don't forget to like, dislike, subscribe, and comment. Safe Space Cafe. And always, Have a good day.